Story 1. Mario Rashad Swain was born on February 28, 1979. He was born in Los Angeles, California. His mother was Michelle Todd, and his father was also named Mario Swain. Mario was their son, and he was their only child from that relationship. When Mario was 5 years old, his parents divorced. After the divorce, Mario lived with his mother. His mother later married another man, and this man became Mario's stepfather. Mario's mother said that Mario got along well with his stepfather, so there were no major problems in that relationship. Mario's family moved many times while he was growing up. They did not stay in one city for a long period. They lived in Long Beach, California. They also lived in Houston, Texas. They also lived in Longview, Texas. Mario's family moved back and forth between California and Texas several times. Because of these moves, Mario had to change schools and make new friends many times. He did not have a stable home environment where he could settle down for many years. When Mario was 10 or 11 years old, his mother noticed that he was having some problems. She was worried about him. She decided to take him to see a psychologist. The psychologist spoke with Mario and evaluated him. After the evaluation, the psychologist told Mario's mother that nothing was wrong with him. His mother accepted that answer and did not take him to any other doctors. When Mario was 12 years old, he moved from California back to Longview, Texas. In Longview, he went to live with his maternal grandparents. His grandparents were named Mr. and Mrs. Todd. Mario lived with them for about 4 or 5 years. His grandparents later said that Mario was quiet and obedient while he lived with them. They said he did not cause them any trouble. He went to church regularly with them and was respectful to them. After living with his grandparents for several years, Mario moved back to California. He did not like living in California, so he returned to Longview again. He continued to live in Longview for the rest of his teenage years and into his early adulthood. Mario attended school and completed 12 years of education. He graduated from high school. After finishing school, he worked as a laborer. He had different jobs. One of the jobs he had was at a company called Seidel. Seidel was a business in Longview that operated a telephone call center. Mario worked there for some time. He did not have any prior prison record before the crime he later committed. Mario had several girlfriends and friendships. One of his girlfriends was named Ashley Russell. She lived with him for a period from February to November of 2001. Ashley Russell later said that Mario had strange habits. She said that Mario kept a spiral notebook. In this notebook, he wrote down descriptions of women. He also wrote down descriptions of their automobiles and their license plate numbers. He told her that he followed women home and watched them. He determined the times they left for work and the times they returned home. He also told her about knocking older women out at car washes and taking their money. Ashley Russell also said that Mario kept a brown glass bottle in his car. He told her that the bottle contained a substance that would put people to sleep. He also kept a wrench in his car. Another girlfriend was named Christy Anderson. She lived with Mario from February 2002 until the time of his arrest. Christy Anderson said that Mario kept a bottle in their apartment. She said the bottle contained a substance that you could knock somebody out with. She also said that Mario kept pieces of paper in the apartment. These papers had names, addresses, phone numbers, license plate numbers, and descriptions of vehicles written on them. She said that she found these papers around the apartment. Mario had a friend named Crystal Hargett. She was with Mario on some occasions. One time, Mario asked her to knock on a woman's door and tell the woman that her car had broken down and she needed to use the phone. Mario told Crystal that he needed to know if the woman was home or if she had children. He said he needed this information so he could go into the house when no one was there. Another time, Mario spotted a woman who left her car running at a gas pump. He told Crystal to take the car and to knock the woman out if she came back. Crystal refused to do these things. Mario had other incidents in his past that showed a pattern of aggressive behavior toward women. In August of 1999, a woman named Betty McDonald Clark was attacked. A man hid in the back seat of her car. He attacked her from behind with a stun gun. She escaped and ran into a convenience store for help. The man stayed in her car for about 5 minutes and then walked away. The police later found that the dome light inside her car had been removed. The police found fingerprints on the dome light cover and on the car door. Those fingerprints matched Mario Swain's fingerprints. In October of 1999, a woman named Judith Harper was attacked. She left a grocery store and got into her car. A man was hiding in the back seat. He attacked her from behind with a stun gun. A store employee opened the passenger door, and Harper ran inside the store to call the police. The man got out of the car and walked away. The store employee identified Mario as the man in that incident. Harper later noticed that the dome light inside her car had been removed. In January of 2001, Mario was dating both Ashley Russell and a woman named Olivia Torres at the same time. They discovered this and decided to confront him. They arrived together to pick him up from work. Mario got into the car with them and drove away at a high speed. Olivia Torres asked Mario to let her out of the car, but he kept driving. She became scared and jumped out of the car while it was moving. She began running down the road. Mario got out of the car, chased her, and shoved her. He knocked her down and repeatedly kicked and hit her while she was on the ground. Olivia Torres got up and ran toward a nearby house for help. Mario then ran back to his car and drove away. Olivia Torres was only 14 years old at the time of this incident. In October of 2002, a woman named Teresa McMean was leaving the salon where she worked. She was hit in the head from behind. She fell to the ground and saw a man standing over her. She began kicking and screaming. The man yanked on her purse and broke its strap. He then ran away. The police found a beer bottle and a wrench at the scene. In November of 2002, Teresa McMean discovered that her phone and her cosmetology license had been taken from the salon. The police investigated and found that someone had tried to pry open a window and had jimmied the lock on the back door. Christy Anderson later said that Mario brought home a phone that was similar to the one stolen from Teresa McMean. In December of 2002, about a month before the murder, Mario attacked a woman named Nicole Anderson. Nicole Anderson lived in an apartment. About a month before the attack, she had seen Mario in front of her building and asked to borrow his phone. On December 5th, 2002, she woke up around 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. She was alone in her apartment with her newborn baby. She saw Mario standing in her room. She was holding her baby and tried to turn on the light. Mario jumped on her, choked her, and demanded her money and credit cards. He threatened to kill her and held a knife to her at one point. He stayed in her apartment for several hours. He wore black gloves the entire time. He left through her bedroom window around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning. He returned later with a brown glass bottle. He said he would put her to sleep and make her forget everything that happened. He poured a substance from the bottle onto a cloth and held it to her face. Nicole passed out. She woke up around 10 o'clock in the morning and tried to leave her apartment with her baby. Mario was standing outside her front door. He asked her where she was going and if she had told anyone about the incident. She said she had not told anyone. She said she was going to visit a friend down the street. Mario let her go and then left. As a youth, Mario was also involved in an incident that involved a cow. The cow belonged to his uncle. Mario and another youth committed an act of sexual cruelty against the cow. The animal was injured and required veterinary care. Mario's grandfather had to pay the veterinarian bill for the injuries to the cow. Mario had a fascination with forensic television programs. He watched shows about crime scene investigation and police work. He experimented with new methods of subduing women. He used stun guns, wrenches, and chemicals to knock people unconscious. He escalated his pattern of violence toward his victims over time. At the time leading up to the crime, Mario was living with Christy Anderson. He was working as an after-hours house sitter at a residential treatment home. He had no prior criminal convictions, but he had committed many attacks and attempted robberies against women. His behavior was known to some people around him, but he had never been arrested for any of these incidents. He continued to live his daily life, working and spending time with his girlfriend, while keeping his notebooks and bottles hidden in his apartment. He seemed like an ordinary young man to some people, but his private activities showed a pattern of stalking and planning attacks against women. On the morning of December 27, 2002, Mario Swain was living with his girlfriend Christy Anderson in their apartment in Longview, Texas. That morning, Christy found a piece of paper in their apartment. The paper had the name Lola Nixon written on it. Next to the name, in parentheses, it said Seidel Girl. The paper also had an address and a license plate number written on it. Mario had previously worked at Seidel, the same company where Lola Nixon worked. He had written down her name, her home address, and her license plate number. He kept this information just like he had kept information about other women in his notebooks. Later that same day, Mario took his grandfather's truck. His grandfather had given him permission to use the truck. Mario drove the truck to the neighborhood where Lola Nixon lived. Her house was on a street called Iris Circle in Longview. Mario parked the truck in front of a vacant house on that same block. He did this so that the truck would not be directly in front of Nixon's house and would be less noticeable. Mario then went to Lola Nixon's house. He forced his way into the house. He used a tool to pry open the back door. Once inside, he began looking for things to steal. He wanted money, jewelry, and other valuable items. He did not know when Nixon would return home. While Mario was inside the house, Lola Nixon came back to her home. She had made plans to have dinner with her friends Deborah Hancock and her husband that evening. She was supposed to meet them at a restaurant. However, she arrived at her house before going to dinner. When she entered her home, she found Mario inside. A struggle began between Mario and Lola Nixon. Mario had a tire tool with him. This tire tool was a metal tool used to change tires on a car, sometimes called a tire iron or a crowbar. During the struggle, Mario used the tire tool to strike Nixon in the head. He hit her multiple times. He also used a knife to stab her in the chest. The medical examiner later determined that Nixon also had injuries consistent with strangulation. She suffered blunt force injuries from the blows to her head, sharp force injuries from the stabbing, and probable strangulation. Nixon was badly injured, but she was still alive after the attack. She was unconscious or barely conscious. Mario then placed her body into the trunk of her own car. Her car was a black BMW. He put her in the trunk and closed it. He then drove her car away from her house. He drove to a remote location in southern Gregg County near the airport. This location was off Highway 349 and near Jerry Lucey Road. It was a secluded field. Mario drove to that field and stopped. He then took Lola Nixon's body out of the trunk of her BMW. He put her body into an abandoned vehicle that was parked in that field. He left her there. She was still breathing but barely conscious when he left her. After leaving Nixon's body in the abandoned car, Mario drove her black BMW back to her house on Iris Circle. He returned to the house. He went inside and tried to clean up the scene. He attempted to remove some of the blood and evidence from the house. He then took money, jewelry, and credit cards from the house. He also took Nixon's car keys and her garage door opener. Mario left Nixon's house on foot. He left her car at her house. He walked to a nearby location. During the night, a neighbor on Iris Circle saw the truck parked in front of the vacant house. The neighbor noticed the truck at around 9 p.m. and called the police. A police officer was dispatched to the street. The officer arrived and noted the license plate number of the truck. He stayed in the area for about 30 to 40 minutes. He did not see any unusual activity, so he left. The police officer did not investigate further that night. Mario went home to the apartment he shared with Christy Anderson. He had used Nixon's credit cards. He used them to withdraw cash and to buy gas. He also gave some of the jewelry he had stolen to his friend Brian Woods. He went to Woods' house on the morning of December 28th and told him that he had robbed a woman. He gave Woods some jewelry as a gift. That same evening of December 27th, Lola Nixon did not show up for her dinner with Deborah Hancock and her husband. They waited at the restaurant, but she never arrived. After dinner, Deborah Hancock stopped by Nixon's house on Iris Circle. She brought a carry-out package of food. She knocked on the front door and received no answer. She left the food at the front door and went home. The next morning, December 28th, 2002, Deborah Hancock tried again to reach Lola Nixon. She could not find her. She became worried. She called the police to report that her friend was missing. Mario continued his normal activities. He went to work as an after-hours house sitter at a residential treatment home. He did not tell anyone what he had done. He disposed of the tire tool he had used to strike Nixon. He threw it into a dumpster located across the parking lot from a Cece's Pizza restaurant. He believed that no one would find it there. He also had black jeans, tennis shoes, and batting gloves that had Nixon's blood on them. He kept these items in his grandfather's truck. He also kept Nixon's car keys and her garage door opener in the truck. Mario did not know that the police officer had written down his grandfather's license plate number the night before. He did not know that the police would soon trace that truck back to his grandfather. He went about his day as if nothing had happened. He was at his workplace when he received a phone call from Detective Terry Davis. The detective wanted to talk to him about why his truck was seen on Iris Circle. Mario agreed to speak with the detective and gave him the address of the residential treatment home where he was working. On December 28th, 2002, the police received a call from Deborah Hancock. She reported that her friend Lola Nixon was missing. The police officers went to Nixon's house on Iris Circle in Longview. When they arrived, they saw that the back door had been forced open. The lock had been pried. The officers entered the house. Inside, they found blood in many places throughout the house. The blood was on the floors and on the walls. There was a large amount of blood, which showed that a violent struggle had taken place. Nixon was not in the house. The police now knew they were investigating a serious crime. The police remembered that a neighbor had reported a truck parked on Iris Circle the night before. A police officer had written down the license plate number of that truck. The police checked that license plate number. The truck was registered to Mario Swain's grandfather. The police contacted the grandfather and asked him about the truck. The grandfather told them that his grandson, Mario Swain, had been using the truck. The police then tried to contact Mario Swain. He was not at his apartment. About 30 minutes later, Mario called Detective Terry Davis. The detective told Mario that he wanted to talk to him about the truck. Mario gave the detective the address of the residential treatment home where he was working as an after-hours house sitter. He told the detective that he could come there to speak with him. Detective Davis and Detective Jim Nelson drove to the residential treatment home. When they arrived, they saw the grandfather's truck parked in the driveway. Mario came outside and met the detectives in front of the garage. They asked him why his truck was seen on Iris Circle the night before. Mario first told them that he had gone riding with a friend and ended up parking his truck there. One of the detectives told Mario that this was his opportunity to come clean and tell the truth. At this point, Mario changed his story. He told the detectives that he and a man named Casey Porter broke into a house on Iris Circle. He said that when the owner came home, Porter attacked her. He said they put the woman, who was alive but unconscious, into the trunk of her car. He said they drove to a remote location near the airport and left her there. Mario agreed to take the detectives to that location. Mario rode in the back of the detective's car. Detective Davis read Mario his Miranda rights at this time. Mario directed them to a field off Highway 349 near the airport. At the field, the police found blood on the grass. They also found a black trash bag and a piece of a tire jack. However, they did not find Lola Nixon. The detectives took Mario to the Longview Police Department. There, he was read his Miranda rights again. He gave a written statement. In this first written statement, he admitted that he participated in the burglary. He again blamed Casey Porter for attacking the woman. The police arrested Casey Porter. They questioned him and found that he had an alibi. Porter was not with Mario on the night of the crime. The police released Porter. The detectives told Mario that Porter had an alibi. They read Mario his rights again. Mario then gave a second written statement. In this statement, he changed his story again. He now claimed that a man named Brian Mason Woods was his accomplice. He said that Woods had assaulted the victim. The police questioned Brian Woods. They found that Woods also had an alibi. Woods was not with Mario that night. The police released Woods. Several hours later, Mario was charged with burglary of a habitation. He was brought before a magistrate. The magistrate read him his rights under Texas law. At this point, Mario requested the appointment of a lawyer. Despite this request, he was then taken to the Gregg County District Attorney's office. There, he was questioned by a different detective and an investigator from the District Attorney's office. Mario agreed to lead them to Nixon's body. He directed them to an abandoned vehicle that was located within a mile of where he had first led detectives Davis and Nelson. Inside that abandoned vehicle, the police found the body of Lola Nixon. She had been beaten over the head and stabbed in the chest. The medical examiner later determined that the cause of death was homicidal violence, including sharp force injuries, blunt force injuries, and probable strangulation. After Mario disclosed the location of the body, he was taken back to the Longview Police Department. Detective Davis read him his rights again. Mario then gave a third written statement. In this third statement, he admitted that he had committed the burglary on his own. He stated that Nixon returned home while he was inside. He said that they struggled, and he hit her with a tire tool. He said he placed her semi-conscious body in the trunk of her car and drove her to the field. He said he left her there while she was still breathing, but barely conscious. He then returned to her house, took money, jewelry, and credit cards, and left. After this confession, the police searched for the tire tool. Mario told them where he had thrown it. He said he disposed of it in a dumpster across the parking lot from Cece's Pizza restaurant. The police went to that dumpster and found the tire tool. They searched Mario's grandfather's truck, which Mario had been driving. Inside the truck, they found black jeans, tennis shoes, and batting gloves. These items had Lola Nixon's blood on them. They also found Nixon's car keys and her garage door opener. Mario had used Nixon's credit cards to get cash and buy gas. He had given some of her jewelry to his friend Brian Woods. The police had strong physical evidence linking Mario to the murder. On March 13, 2003, Mario Swain was indicted in Gregg County, Texas. He was charged with capital murder. The charge was that he murdered Lola Nixon while he was committing a burglary of her home. The trial began in November 2003. The jury heard all of the evidence. They heard about the blood in the house, the tire tool, the clothing with Nixon's blood on it, the credit card use, and the jewelry given to Woods. They heard Mario's multiple statements and his attempts to blame other people. They also heard about his past attacks on other women, including the stun gun attacks, the attack on Olivia Torres, the attack on Nicole Anderson, and the notebook with descriptions of women and their vehicles. The prosecution argued that Mario had planned the attack and that he was a danger to society. On November 19, 2003, the jury found Mario Swain guilty of capital murder. The trial then moved to the punishment phase. The jury had to decide whether Mario should receive the death penalty. The prosecution presented evidence of his past violent behavior. They showed that he had attacked many women and had escalated his violence over time. The defense presented witnesses, including his mother and grandparents, who said that Mario had a good side. However, the jury decided that Mario posed a future danger to society. On November 20th, 2003, the jury recommended that Mario Swain be sentenced to death. The trial judge followed the jury's recommendation and sentenced Mario to death by lethal injection. After the trial, Mario Swain began his appeals. His case was automatically appealed to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. On November 5, 2005, that court affirmed his conviction and death sentence. Mario asked the court to rehear the case, but that request was denied on January 26, 2006. He then appealed to the United States Supreme Court. On October 2, 2006, the Supreme Court refused to review his case. Mario then filed an application for a state writ of habeas corpus. This is a legal request to challenge his imprisonment based on violations of his rights. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied this application on September 20, 2006. He then filed a federal habeas corpus petition in the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Texas. On March 31, 2010, the federal district court denied his petition. Mario appealed this decision to the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. On April 18, 2012, the Fifth Circuit affirmed the district court's decision and denied Mario relief. He then appealed again to the United States Supreme Court. On October 15, 2012, the Supreme Court refused to review his case for a second time. All of Mario's appeals were exhausted. He had no more legal options. The state of Texas scheduled his execution for November 8, 2012. As the date approached, Mario declined to give any interviews to the media. He did not request a special last meal because Texas had stopped offering special meals to condemned inmates. Instead, he received the same meal that was served to the rest of the prison unit. On the evening of November 8, 2012, Mario Swain was taken to the execution chamber in Huntsville, Texas. He was 33 years old. The warden asked him if he wanted to make a final statement. Mario shook his head to indicate that he had no last words. He did not say anything. The lethal injection was then administered. The execution began at 6:09 p.m. Central Daylight Time. Mario closed his eyes and took several breaths. Within a moment, all movement stopped. He was pronounced dead at 6:39 p.m. No family members of Lola Nixon attended the execution, and no family members of Mario Swain attended either. Mario Rashad Swain was the 490th person executed in Texas since the death penalty was reinstated in 1976, and the case of Lola Nixon's murder was finally closed. Story 2. Brett Xavier Hartman was born on June 29, 1974. He was a white male. His early life was not stable. His parents divorced when he was 4 years old. After the divorce, Brett moved with his mother and her boyfriend to California. This was the first of many moves he would make as a child. Brett had difficulty in school. He had problems adjusting to new places. He was described as hyperactive. Teachers and family members noticed he had trouble sitting still and focusing. He repeated the 3rd grade. However, in 4th grade, his grades improved. He became a strong B student. When Brett was 8 years old, his mother sent him to live with his aunt. His aunt's name was Arletta Hartman. She was a teacher on a Navajo Indian reservation in Arizona. Brett was enrolled in a Catholic school on the reservation. He lived with his aunt for 3.5 years. During this time, he was described as a very good and kind boy. But he was still hyperactive and had some problems adjusting to life on the reservation. When Brett was 12 years old, he started having problems in school again. He became rebellious. His aunt decided she could not handle him anymore. She sent him to live with his natural father in New Mexico. His stepmother was very strict. Brett did not like living there. He started running away from home. Eventually, he was placed into a juvenile center for theft. He then moved back to his mother's home in California. When Brett was 14 or 15 years old, he spent time in a youth home for car theft and alcohol abuse. He did not stay there. He illegally left the youth home and went to live with his sister in Akron, Ohio. He was around 17 or 18 years old at that time. While living with his sister, he worked at factory jobs. He paid her rent and helped with bills, but he still had problems with alcohol. His sister noticed that he drank too much. When Brett turned 18, he returned to California. He turned himself in to the authorities. He went back to the youth home to finish his time there. While he was at the youth home, he earned his GED. He also got a job. After that, he moved back to Ohio with his mother. They settled in Akron. Brett worked as a chef at a place called the Quaker Square Hilton. He was known to be a hard worker. He lived with his mother in her apartment. He did this to share living expenses. His mother had just had hip replacement surgery, so he helped take care of her and paid his share of the bills. Brett had a history of drinking alcohol. He started using alcohol when he was around 11 years old. His drinking got worse over time. He would typically drink a 12-pack of beer in one night. He also smoked marijuana and used other drugs. He had multiple convictions for driving under the influence. He had at least 5 or 6 DUI convictions. Because of these, he lost his driver's license. He had to ride the bus to get to work. Brett met a woman named Wynda Snipes at a bar in Akron sometime during 1997. They had a casual friendship. They saw each other at bars and talked. They had sexual intercourse on several occasions. Brett knew her as a person he would see when he went out drinking. He did not know her last name at first. He only knew her by a nickname that he and others used. Brett had a sister named Diane Moretti and another sister named Rhea Walpert. He also had an aunt, Arletta, who had taken care of him when he was young. His family knew that he had problems with alcohol. They also knew that he had a difficult childhood with many moves and changes. But Brett was trying to be stable. He had a job. He was living with his mother. He was helping with expenses. Brett talked to people at work. One of his coworkers was named Christopher Hoffman. They would have conversations about different topics. Brett was known to be friendly and liked by people who knew him. He did not have a history of violent behavior. He had never been convicted of a violent crime. His past problems were mostly about theft as a teenager and driving under the influence as an adult. Brett continued to drink heavily in the months before September 1997. He would go to bars in Akron. One bar was called the Bucket Shop. Another bar was called the In-Between. He knew many people at these bars. He would drink and talk with friends. He would sometimes go to Wynda Snipes' apartment after they met at the bar. They would have sex and then he would leave. Brett's mother, Carol Parcell, lived with him. She knew he came home late some nights. She knew he drank a lot, but she did not see him as a dangerous person. She saw him as a son who was trying to hold down a job and help his family. Brett had a habit of talking a lot when he was nervous or had been drinking. He would become very talkative. He would move around a lot. People who knew him noticed that he could be hyperactive at times. He also had a habit of saying things without thinking first. He would sometimes make comments that seemed strange or inappropriate to others. Brett had no serious long-term relationships with women. He would meet women at bars and have casual sex. He did not have a girlfriend. He did not have children. His life revolved around work, drinking at bars, and coming home to his mother's apartment. In August 1997, Brett had a conversation with his coworker Christopher Hoffman. They talked about the O.J. Simpson trial, which had been in the news. Brett made some comments during that conversation. Those comments would later become important. But at the time, it was just a casual talk between two coworkers at the hotel where they worked. Brett continued his routine. He went to work. He went to bars. He drank. He went home. He interacted with people he knew from the bars, including Winda Snipes. Their relationship was not serious. They were just two people who saw each other at bars and sometimes had sex. Brett did not think much about it. He did not see himself as having any deep connection to her. On September 8, 1997, Brett went to work at the Quaker Square Hilton. He worked his shift. He went home afterward. He was off work the next day. September 9, 1997, was a day when Brett did not have to go to work. He stayed at home. He slept late. His mother was not home during the day. She was out of the apartment. Brett was alone in the apartment for much of that day. Brett had been to Winda Snipes' apartment in the early morning hours of September 9th. They had sex. He left her apartment around 3:30 in the morning. He went back to his mother's apartment. He went to sleep. He did not think about what would happen later that day. Brett got up around 6:15 in the evening on September 9th. He got ready. He left his apartment around 7:30 in the evening. He planned to go to the in-between bar. He was going to drink and see his friends. He did not know that his life was about to change completely. As he walked toward the bar, he noticed that the bathroom light was on in Winda Snipes' apartment. He decided to visit her. He thought he might have sex with her again. He went to her apartment building. The door was unlocked. He went inside. What he saw inside would shock him and change everything. Brett Hartman entered Winda Snipes' apartment through the unlocked door. He walked inside. He went toward the bedroom. He saw her body lying on the bedroom floor. She was naked. Her leg was draped across the bed. A pair of pantyhose tied her ankle to the bed leg. A white plastic chair was on top of her body. He noticed that her hands had been cut off. They were not there. He saw blood everywhere. Brett later said that he tried to pick her body up off the floor. He said he wanted to put her on the bed. He said he wanted to see if there was anything he could do to help. But then he realized she was dead. He saw she had no hands. He panicked. He thought, "I'm going to get busted for this." He knew that his fingerprints and semen were in the apartment because he had been there earlier that morning. Brett decided to clean up the scene. He washed her blood off his hands. He went to the bathroom and ran water over his hands in the bathtub. He tried to wipe down everything he had touched. He wiped cupboards. He wiped chair handles. He wiped anything else he could think of. He gathered any items he could find that belonged to him. He took these items and left the apartment. He ran home. When Brett got home, he changed his shoes. He took off the clothes he had been wearing. One item was a t-shirt. It had blood on it. He hid the bloody t-shirt under the headboard of his bed so his mother would not find it. He also had a pair of jeans and boots that had been at the crime scene. He threw some items from Snipes' apartment into a nearby dumpster. One item was Winda Snipes' wristwatch. He took it from her apartment. He later put it on his bedstand in his own bedroom. After cleaning himself and hiding evidence, Brett hurried back to the in-between bar. He started drinking. He wanted to make it look like he had been at the bar all evening. He appeared nervous and hyper. He talked excessively. He went in and out of the bar 5 to 6 times between 9 p.m. and 10:30 p.m. Brett made the first anonymous 911 call at 9:59 p.m. He reported the location of a mutilated body. He gave the address of Winda Snipes' apartment. Police officers were dispatched to the address. They entered the apartment building and checked around. They did not find anything unusual. They left. Brett watched the police arrive and leave. He was hiding behind a tree across the street from the apartment. He saw the police leave. He made another anonymous 911 call. He told the police to return to the apartment building. He gave them more specific instructions about where to find the body. Police officers responded to the second call. They entered Winda Snipes' apartment. The door was unlocked. They found her naked, mutilated body on the bedroom floor. They saw the white chair on top of her body. They saw that her hands were cut off. The hands were never found. The police began their investigation. Around 10:45 p.m., Brett was at the in-between bar with David Morris. Morris was an acquaintance. He had seen Brett at Snipes' apartment earlier that morning. Morris learned that Snipes had been murdered. He suggested to Brett that Brett should talk to the police. Morris had seen Brett at Snipes' apartment. He thought Brett might have information. Shortly before midnight, Brett approached Detective Gregory Harrison. Harrison was at a mobile crime lab parked outside Snipes' apartment. Brett walked up to him and said, "I hear it's pretty bad in there." He asked if Harrison had ever seen anything so gruesome. Later that night, Brett approached Harrison a second time. He spontaneously said that Snipes was a whore. He said she slept around a lot. He said he had slept with her the night before at 3 a.m. Around 3 a.m., Brett was mumbling to himself. Harrison heard him say, "She was a whore, she was a big whore, she got what she deserved." Between 11:30 p.m. and 12:15 a.m., Brett approached another police officer, Lieutenant John A. Lawson. He was near the murder scene. Brett said abruptly, "You're going to find my semen in her and my prints over there." Lawson asked why. Brett said he had been with her earlier that morning and had had sex with her. At 12:15 a.m. on September 10th, Brett spoke to Detective Joseph Abank. He was in front of the apartment building. Brett started the conversation by announcing he had sex with the victim the night before. He said he did not know her name. He only knew her as Psycho Bitch. He said everybody knew that if you got drunk and were horny, you went to see her. Brett told Abank what happened earlier that morning. He said he went to Snipes' apartment at 2:30 a.m. He said she started dancing a little bit. He lifted her onto the bed and undressed her. They had vaginal intercourse. He said he was disappointed because she refused to have anal intercourse. He left her apartment around 3:30 a.m. He claimed he did not know anything about the murder until the bartender at the inn between told him about it that evening. Around 6 a.m. on September 10th, police took Brett to the Akron police station. They interviewed him. He denied making the 911 calls. He denied hiding behind a tree across from Snipes' apartment. Then he changed his story. He admitted that he had hidden behind the tree near the murder scene. Police searched Brett's apartment with his consent. They found a bloody t-shirt hidden under the headboard of his bed. They found a pair of his jeans and his boots. They found a knife on his dresser. They found Wynda Snipes' wristwatch on his bedstand. The watch had not been tested for DNA at that time. After the search, police took Brett back to the police station. While awaiting transfer to the Summit County Jail, Brett approached Detective John R. Gilbride. He blurted out, "I was the one that called the police." He also said, "I'm the one that found the body." Brett gave Gilbride another version of his story. He said he had been sexually involved with Snipes since February 1997. He had sex with her in the early morning hours of September 9th. He said that after having sex, the psycho bitch threw him out of the apartment. She told him her boyfriend was coming over. He left around 3:30 a.m. and returned to his own apartment. He said he slept until 6 p.m. He took the bus to the inn between bar around 7:30 p.m. He noticed the light on in Snipes' apartment and decided to visit her. He entered through the unlocked door and found her dead body in the bedroom. He tried to pick her up but could not. He noticed her hands were cut off and freaked out. He washed blood off his hands and clothes. He wiped down everything he touched. He removed evidence linking him to her apartment and went home. Wynda Snipes was stabbed 138 times. Her throat was slit. Her hands were cut off and never found. She had been gagged. She had been tied to the bed with pantyhose. Bruising on her ankles showed she was alive when she was tied. The medical examiner found sperm in her vagina and anus. The medical examiner concluded she died from strangulation and a slit throat in the late afternoon or early evening of September 9th. Police found Brett's bloody fingerprint on the leg of the white chair that was draped over Snipes's body. They found another of his fingerprints on her bedspread. An expert later determined that long linear blood patterns found on Brett's t-shirt and Snipes's bedspread were applied by a long-bladed knife. The blood patterns on Brett's t-shirt were applied while the shirt was lying flat, not while he was wearing it. At the Quaker Square Hilton, where Brett worked as a chef, police found a set of his knives. This included a meat cleaver, a knife, and a knife sharpener. The medical examiner noted that the removal of Snipes's hands was done with precision. The cut was at the end of the bone. The bone itself was not sawed or cut. The ligaments were cut across. The hands could be removed with just a few incisions. This suggested the person who did it knew how to use a knife. Brett had spoken to a coworker, Christopher Hoffman, in August 1997. They talked about the O.J. Simpson trial. Brett said that Simpson could have disposed of evidence by cutting off the victim's hands. He said this would eliminate fibers, hair, and skin that might be found under the fingernails. This conversation became important later because Snipes's hands had been cut off. Brett also spoke to a fellow inmate at the Summit County Jail. The inmate's name was Brian Tyson. Tyson later testified that Brett admitted he had killed Snipes. According to Tyson, Brett said he pushed himself on her. Something in his mind snapped. She was hitting him. He lost his temper. He did things he regretted. He killed her. He said he tried to make it look like a burglary. He admitted cutting off her hands. He mentioned using a hacksaw. He made a joke about it, saying, "Don't leave home without it," like the credit card commercial. Brett's mother, Carol Parcell, gave an alibi. She said she came home at 6:15 p.m. on September 9th. She said her son was sleeping in his bedroom. He woke up at 7 p.m., got ready, left the apartment at 7:30 p.m., and returned around 8:15 p.m. But this did not match other evidence. Phone records showed Brett received and made calls from his apartment at 3:12 p.m. and 4:50 p.m. A friend named Jessica O'Neill said she talked to him on the phone around 6:30 or 7 p.m. These calls showed he was at home during the late afternoon and early evening. Defense lawyers suggested there might be another suspect. A man named Jeff Nichols lived across the hallway from Snipes's apartment. He moved out around September 1st, 1997. He worked as a handyman and had access to the landlord's keys. A friend of Snipes named Jeffrey Barnes said that in January 1997, Nichols came to Snipes's door and said, "Slit the bitch's throat, cut her up." He called her a slut. Barnes reported this to police after the murder. A neighbor named Linda Zarsky heard Snipes pounding on Nichols's door. Snipes was screaming that she wanted her shirt back. Another neighbor named Linda Kienbrew heard Nichols arguing with Snipes. He was telling her to let him in, and she would not. But Brett's own actions spoke loudly. He had made the anonymous 911 calls. He had hidden behind a tree and watched police arrive. He had approached police and told them he had sex with the victim. He had told them he would be found in her semen and prints. He had called her a whore and said she got what she deserved. He had washed blood off his hands. He had hidden the bloody t-shirt. He had taken her watch and kept it on his bedstand. He had lied to police and then changed his story multiple times. Brett's behavior after finding the body was not the behavior of an innocent person. He did not call police immediately and wait for them. He tried to clean up the scene. He removed evidence. He hid items in his apartment. He made anonymous calls instead of identifying himself. He watched police from across the street instead of coming forward. He told police he had been at the apartment earlier, but gave conflicting accounts of what happened. He said he had sex with her, but denied having anal sex even though sperm was found in her anus. The brutality of the crime was extreme. 138 stab wounds showed a high level of rage. The cutting off of her hands showed a desire to eliminate evidence. The fingers and nails could have held skin or hair from the attacker. The hands were never found, so that evidence was permanently gone. The gag and the binding showed that Snipes was alive and restrained while the attack happened. She could not escape. She could not call for help. She was terrorized before she died. Brett's own statements to police and others showed he had knowledge that only the killer would have. He knew her hands were cut off. He knew she had been tied. He knew the condition of her body. He mentioned cutting off hands to eliminate evidence in a conversation a month before the murder. He made a jailhouse confession to a fellow inmate. The evidence against Brett was strong. It was not just one piece of evidence. It was many pieces that all pointed in the same direction. His fingerprint was on the chair draped over her body. His fingerprint was on her bedspread. His bloody t-shirt was hidden in his room. Her watch was on his bedstand. His semen was in her body. He admitted being there. He admitted having sex with her. He admitted finding her body. He admitted cleaning up. He admitted making the 911 calls. He admitted hiding and watching police. He admitted taking items from her apartment. Brett's story changed multiple times. First, he said he did not know about the murder until the bartender told him. Then he said he found her body and panicked. Then he said he tried to clean up. Then he admitted he made the calls. Each time he was confronted with evidence, he added new details. But he never gave a consistent account. He never explained why an innocent person would hide evidence and call anonymously. The case against Brett was built on his own words and his own actions. He had put himself at the scene. He had put his fingerprints there. He had put his DNA there. He had taken her property. He had tried to hide what he had done. He had made statements showing he knew details that only the killer could know. All of these facts pointed to one conclusion. Brett Xavier Hartman had killed Wynda Snipes in a brutal and savage attack. The police had enough evidence to charge him. They arrested him on September 10, 1997. He was taken to the Summit County Jail. But the full investigation, the trial, and the final outcome had not yet happened. Those events would come later. After Brett Hartman was arrested on September 10, 1997, the police continued their investigation. They gathered all the evidence they had found. They collected the bloody t-shirt from his bedroom. They collected the knife from his dresser. They collected Wynda Snipes' wristwatch from his bedstand. They documented his fingerprints on the chair and the bedspread. They documented his statements to the police officers at the scene. They documented his multiple changes to his story. The police presented all of this evidence to a grand jury. On September 17, 1997, the grand jury issued an indictment. Brett was formally charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder. 1 count was for murder with prior calculation and design. The other count was for felony murder during a kidnapping. He was also charged with kidnapping and tampering with evidence. The kidnapping charge carried a capital specification. This meant that if he was found guilty of murder during the kidnapping, he could face the death penalty. The case went to trial on April 14, 1998. The prosecution presented its case first. They called witnesses to testify. The witnesses included police officers who had responded to the scene. They included the detectives who had spoken to Brett. They included David Morris, who had seen Brett at Snipes' apartment early that morning. They included Richard Russell, the bartender who said Brett was nervous and hyper that night. They included Christopher Hoffman, the coworker who had talked with Brett about cutting off hands. They included Brian Tyson, the fellow inmate who said Brett had confessed in jail. The prosecution also called expert witnesses. One expert testified about the fingerprints found on the chair and bedspread. Another expert testified about the blood patterns on Brett's t-shirt and Snipes' bedspread. This expert said the blood stains were made by a long-bladed knife while the t-shirt was lying flat. The medical examiner testified about the cause of death. He explained that Snipes had been stabbed 138 times, her throat was slit, and she was strangled. He also testified that she was alive when she was tied to the bed. The defense presented its own case. Brett's mother, Carol Parcell, testified that she had seen him sleeping at home in the late afternoon. A friend named Jessica O'Neill testified that she had spoken to Brett on the phone at 3:12 p.m. and 4:50 p.m. on September 9th. The defense also tried to suggest that another person could have committed the crime. They pointed to Jeff Nichols, the neighbor who had made threatening comments about Snipes. They showed that Nichols had access to the building's master keys. But Nichols had an alibi for the hours after 9 p.m., and the prosecution argued that the evidence against Brett was far stronger. Brett testified in his own defense. He told the jury his version of events. He admitted having sex with Snipes that morning. He admitted returning to her apartment later. He admitted finding her body. He admitted cleaning up and hiding evidence. He admitted making the anonymous 911 calls. He admitted hiding behind the tree and watching police. But he insisted that he did not kill her. He said he panicked because he was afraid of being blamed. He said he was innocent of the murder itself. The jury did not believe Brett's story. After hearing all the evidence, they deliberated. On April 30th, 1998, the jury found Brett guilty on all charges. He was guilty of aggravated murder. He was guilty of the kidnapping specification. He was guilty of kidnapping as a separate offense. He was guilty of tampering with evidence. The same jury then moved to the penalty phase. They had to decide whether Brett should be sentenced to death or to life in prison. During the penalty phase, the defense presented mitigating evidence. Brett's sister, Rhea Walpert, testified about his difficult childhood. She described the many moves, the family problems, and his struggles with alcohol. Brett's aunt, Arletta Hartman, also testified. She described the time she had cared for him on the reservation. She talked about his hyperactivity and his problems in school. The defense argued that Brett's troubled background and his youth, he was 23 at the time, should make the jury choose life instead of death. The prosecution argued that the aggravating circumstance of kidnapping outweighed any mitigating factors. They pointed to the extreme brutality of the crime. They pointed to Brett's lack of remorse. They pointed to his attempts to cover up what he had done. The jury weighed the evidence. On May 22, 1998, they recommended the death penalty for the aggravated murder of Wynda Snipes. The trial judge agreed with the jury's recommendation. He sentenced Brett to death. He also sentenced Brett to 10 years in prison for kidnapping and 5 years for tampering with evidence. The death sentence was the main punishment. After the trial, Brett began the appeals process. He had the right to appeal his conviction and sentence. His first appeal went to the Ohio Supreme Court. This was his direct appeal. He raised several arguments. He said there was not enough evidence for the kidnapping charge. He said the trial court had allowed improper evidence. He said the jury instructions were wrong. He said his lawyers had not done a good job. The Ohio Supreme Court reviewed all of these claims. On September 19, 2001, the court issued its decision. The court rejected all of Brett's arguments. The court affirmed his convictions and his death sentence. Brett then filed appeals in the federal court system. This is called a habeas corpus petition. He asked the federal court to review his case. He argued that his constitutional rights had been violated. He raised claims about ineffective assistance of counsel. He raised claims about improper jury instructions. He raised claims about prosecutorial misconduct. He also raised a claim about the kidnapping specification. The federal district court reviewed his case. In August 2004, the district court denied his petition. Brett appealed that decision to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. In 2007, the Sixth Circuit upheld the lower court's decision. The court found no constitutional violations. Brett's conviction and death sentence remained in place. Brett's lawyers continued to fight for him. They filed additional motions and requests. They argued that some evidence had never been tested. They said fingerprints on a clock and a mop handle could point to another suspect. They asked for DNA testing. The court allowed DNA testing on the semen samples taken from Snipes' body. The tests came back. Both samples matched Brett's DNA. This did not help his case. It only confirmed what the prosecution had already shown. Brett also sought clemency from the Ohio Parole Board. Clemency is a request for mercy. It asks the governor or the parole board to reduce the sentence or grant a pardon. Brett requested clemency 3 separate times. Each time, the Ohio Parole Board considered his request. Each time, they unanimously denied it. The board cited the brutality of the crime. They cited the overwhelming evidence of his guilt. They noted that Brett had never taken full responsibility. He continued to claim he was innocent. The board saw no reason to recommend mercy. Brett was scheduled to be executed twice before the final date. In 2009, he came within about a week of execution. But federal courts allowed him to pursue his innocence claim. That delayed the execution. In 2011, he had another execution date. That was also postponed. The postponement was because of a federal lawsuit over Ohio's execution policy. The state was changing its lethal injection procedures. Eventually, the courts resolved those issues. A new execution date was set for November 13, 2012. On November 13, 2012, Brett Xavier Hartman was taken to the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville. He was 38 years old. He had spent over 14 years on death row. Before the execution, he was offered a final meal. He chose steak with sautéed mushrooms, fried shrimp, a baked potato with butter and sour cream, macaroni and cheese, vanilla ice cream with walnuts, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, and honeycomb cereal with milk. He ate most of the food. He did not eat the macaroni and cheese. At 10:34 a.m., the execution began. The state used a single dose of the drug pentobarbital. This was the lethal injection method. Brett lay on the gurney. He gave his final words. He said, "I'm good, let's roll." He smiled toward his sister, Diane Moretti. He gave a thumbs up to her, to a friend, and to his attorney. He then said something inaudible to the warden. The drug was administered. The process was not immediate. His abdomen rose and fell. He coughed. His head shifted rhythmically for a few moments. His sister watched and dabbed at her eyes. The warden pronounced him dead at 10:34 a.m. He was the 49th person executed in Ohio since the state resumed executions in 1999. He was the 38th person executed in the United States in 2012. After Brett's death, his family released a statement through his attorney. They continued to profess his innocence. They said, "We hope that the taking of Brett's innocent life might serve as a wake-up call to the flaws in our legal system." They asked for additional testing of crime scene evidence. They believed that Brett had been wrongly convicted. The victim's family reacted differently. A friend of Wynda Snipes named Jacqueline Brown witnessed the execution. She said afterward that the family was relieved the case was finally over. She said the continuous rounds of appeals and media reports were at an end. She said Brett was very, very, very guilty. She also said, "Now Wynda can be at peace, and that's what it's all about." The case of Brett Xavier Hartman came to a final end on that day. The evidence against him had been strong. His own statements, his fingerprints, his DNA, and his actions had all pointed to his guilt. The courts had reviewed his case multiple times. Each review upheld his conviction and sentence. His execution was carried out as the law required. Wynda Snipes had been murdered in 1997. 15 years later, the man convicted of her murder was put to death. The legal process had reached its final conclusion. Brett Xavier Hartman was executed for the aggravated murder of Wynda Snipes, and the story of his crime and punishment was closed. Story 3. Ramon Torres Hernandez was born on November 8, 1971, in San Antonio, Texas. He was Hispanic and grew up in the Bexar County area. He had a brother named Daniel, and he also had a mother who was present in his life. His father died when Ramon was a teenager. This loss affected the family, but Ramon continued to live in San Antonio through his youth. Ramon went to school and completed 9 years of education. He did not finish high school. As a young man, he held various jobs to earn money. He worked in construction, he worked in food service, and he also did general labor work. He did not have a steady career. He moved between different types of work, depending on what was available. As a teenager, Ramon started to have problems with the law. In 1986, when he was still a juvenile, he was charged with delinquent conduct. The charge was for entering a house with the intent to commit theft. Because he was young, he was not sent to prison. Instead, he was placed on juvenile probation for 1 year. He had to follow rules set by the court, and he managed to complete that probation without further trouble at that time. In 1990, Ramon had another run-in with the law. He was arrested for felony theft of a vehicle and for unlawfully carrying a weapon. The weapon was a knife with a blade longer than 5 inches. The felony theft charge was eventually dismissed, but he was convicted of the weapon charge on July 18, 1990. This was his first adult conviction. The most serious events in his early life happened in 1990 and 1991. In March 1991, Ramon pleaded guilty to 3 counts of burglary of a habitation with intent to commit theft. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison for these crimes. The details of these burglaries showed a pattern of breaking into homes. The first burglary happened on April 24, 1990. Ramon entered a home through a kitchen window while the owner was at work. He stole many items from that house. The second burglary also happened on April 24, 1990. Ramon and an accomplice broke down the door of another home. While they were inside trying to steal things, a neighbor noticed and called the police. Ramon and his accomplice ran away on foot, but they were later caught with the stolen items in their car. The third burglary was different and more serious. It happened on January 12, 1991. Ramon, along with a friend named Santos Minjarez, invited a man named Danny Zapata to Ramon's apartment. They told him they would watch a pornographic movie. While they were inside, Ramon left the apartment and locked the burglar door from the outside so that Danny Zapata and Santos Minjarez could not leave. Ramon then went to a nearby apartment where Danny Zapata's wife, Ana Marie Diaz, was sleeping with her 1-year-old child beside her. Ramon entered through an unlocked door and sexually assaulted Ana Marie Diaz in her bed. Ramon and Ana Marie had been friends for many years. Even though this was a sexual assault, Ramon only pleaded guilty to burglary of a habitation. He did not plead guilty to sexual assault in that case, but the facts of what he did were known. Because of these 3 burglaries, especially the one involving the sexual assault, Ramon was given 18 years in prison. However, he did not serve the full sentence. He was released on parole on June 11, 1993. He had served only about 2 years of his sentence before he was allowed to leave prison under supervision. After his release, Ramon continued to have problems. On March 15, 1994, he and Santos Minjarez were observed robbing a home again. When police tried to arrest them, Ramon drove a car and led the police on a high-speed chase. The chase ended when Ramon crashed his car into a drainage ditch. Both men tried to run away on foot, but Ramon was caught. He was charged with burglary for this incident, but the charges were later dismissed because there was not enough evidence to take the case to trial. Ramon also became a person of interest in other violent cases in the San Antonio area, but he was not formally charged with those at that time. He continued to live in San Antonio after the charges were dropped. He had several relationships and fathered children out of wedlock. He also began to suffer from anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. He was prescribed a medication called Klonopin to help with these problems. Doctors later tried to reduce his dose, which caused him to have withdrawal symptoms. By the late 1990s, Ramon was in a relationship with a woman named Asıl Abdigaparova. Asıl was a student from Kazakhstan who was studying at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Ramon and Asıl had a child together, a son they named Ramon Jr. Ramon was on parole and had to follow strict rules, but he continued to live a troubled life. He had a reputation for being involved in thefts and other unlawful activities. He also had a connection with Santos Minhares, who was a friend from his earlier criminal days. They stayed in contact even after they had both been in prison. Ramon's life was unstable. He worked when he could, but he also continued to associate with people who had criminal records. He had a history of violence and sexual assault that was known to law enforcement and to some people in his community. He was a registered sex offender because of the 1991 burglary case where he had committed a sexual assault. This meant that his name was on a list that police could check. He had to report his address and follow other parole rules. He lived in San Antonio, in the same area where he had grown up. By the spring of 2001, Ramon was still on parole and still living in San Antonio. His relationship with Asıl was ongoing, and they spent time together. His friend Santos Minhares was also still in his life. Ramon was dealing with his anxiety issues and his medication changes. He continued to drive around the city with his girlfriend and his friend, looking for ways to get money. His past crimes and his current parole status meant that he was always at risk of being sent back to prison if he broke any rules. His life had been full of bad decisions and criminal activity from a young age, and he had not been able to stay out of trouble for very long. In the spring of 2001, Ramon was still living in San Antonio. He was on parole, but he continued to spend time with his girlfriend Asıl Abdigaparova and his friend Santos Minhares. They often drove around the city together. On the night of March 31st, 2001, the three of them were in a car. Ramon was driving. Santos was sitting in the front passenger seat. Asıl was in the back seat. She was 5 months pregnant with Ramon's child. That night, they were looking for someone to rob. They drove around the west side of San Antonio, which was the same area where Ramon had lived for many years. At a bus stop, they saw a woman standing alone. Her name was Rosa Maria Rosado. She was 37 years old. She was a single mother. She had been waiting for a bus and had just finished talking on a pay phone across the street. Rosa started to walk across the street toward the bus stop. Ramon pulled the car up next to her. Santos reached out and grabbed her purse. Rosa held on to her purse and did not let go. Because she resisted, Santos pulled her into the car through the open door. He made her sit in the back seat between himself and Asıl. Rosa was now trapped inside the car. Ramon drove away from the bus stop. He drove to his own house. When they arrived, Asıl went inside and got some mailing tape. Santos used that tape to cover Rosa's mouth so she could not scream. He also placed a towel over her head so she could not see where they were going. Rosa was tied up and gagged. Ramon then drove them to a motel. Santos told Asıl to take money from Rosa's purse and use it to pay for a motel room. Asıl did what she was told. She paid for the room. Then Ramon and Santos took Rosa into the room. Asıl stayed outside for a short time. When Asıl entered the room, she saw that Rosa was alive but half naked. Santos told Asıl to go to a store and buy bleach and some douches. Asıl left the motel and went to buy those items. She returned about 10 or 15 minutes later. When she came back, Ramon and Santos were in the bathroom with Rosa. They talked briefly. Then Santos told Asıl to go to a Walmart store and buy a shovel. Asıl did not know what a shovel was because she was from Kazakhstan and English was not her first language. She went to Walmart and had to ask for help from a store employee to find a shovel. She bought it and returned to the motel. While Assel was gone, Ramon stayed outside the motel room to make sure no one was watching. Santos was inside with Rosa. According to Ramon's later confession, he saw Santos sitting on top of Rosa and holding a pillow over her head. Ramon then went back outside. When he came back into the room about 10 minutes later, Rosa was dead. She had been strangled to death. After that, Santos told Assel that Rosa was gone. Assel asked if that meant she was killed, and Santos said yes. Assel then saw Rosa's dead body on the floor. The body was naked. There was some blood on the right side of Rosa's face. Ramon and Santos collected everything from the motel room. They wrapped Rosa's body in a blanket. They carried the body to the car and placed it in the back seat. Assel drove the car. Ramon directed her to a wooded area near the University of Texas at San Antonio campus. When they arrived, Assel dropped Ramon and Santos off at the location. They told her to leave and come back in 30 minutes. She left and returned after 30 minutes. They asked her to leave again. She left for a short time and then returned once more. By that time, Ramon and Santos had dug a shallow grave using the shovel Assel had bought. They placed Rosa's body in the grave and covered it with dirt. After they buried Rosa, Ramon and Assel took Rosa's personal belongings. They burned some of them. They threw other items out of the car window as they drove away from the area. They wanted to get rid of any evidence that could link them to Rosa. 5 days later, on April 5th, 2001, Assel Abdigaparova went to the police. She told them about the abduction, the robbery, the sexual assault, and the murder of Rosa Maria Rosado. She led police officers to the location where Rosa's body was buried. She also showed them the motel where the crimes had happened. She also told them about the car that had been used in the crime. She had sold that car after the murder, but she told police where they could find it. However, the crimes committed by Ramon were not limited to the 2001 murder of Rosa Rosado. The police later connected him to another set of crimes that had happened years earlier. In December 1994, 2 young girls were abducted in San Antonio. Their names were Sarah Gonzalez, who was 13 years old, and her cousin Priscilla Almars, who was 12 years old. They were walking to a friend's holiday party on December 16, 1994, when they disappeared. The next day, their bodies were found in a brush area near a road. Both girls had been sexually assaulted. Both had been asphyxiated, which means they were strangled to death. A medical examination found sperm on one of the girls, but at that time, DNA testing could not identify who the sperm belonged to. The case went unsolved for many years. In 2001, after Ramon was arrested for Rosa's murder, DNA testing was done again on the evidence from the 1994 case. The test results showed that the sperm found on Sarah Gonzalez matched Ramon's DNA. This meant that Ramon had sexually assaulted and killed both Sarah and Priscilla as well. Those 2 murders were part of the same pattern of abduction, sexual assault, and strangulation that he had committed with others. During the events of the 2001 crime, some people noticed things that were wrong. Assel was clearly involved, and she later confessed to police because she was afraid of the men, especially Santos. But at the time the crimes were happening, no one stopped them. Rosa was taken from a public bus stop, but nobody interfered because the abduction happened very quickly. The motel staff did not notice anything unusual. The police were not called during the crime itself. The crimes were carried out in private locations, first in the car, then in Ramon's house, then in the motel room, and finally in the wooded area. The perpetrators used tape to silence Rosa, a towel to cover her eyes, and a blanket to wrap her body. They used bleach and douches to try to clean up evidence. They used a shovel to bury the body. They used lies and commands to get Assel to do what they wanted, including buying the shovel and paying for the motel room. The victims suffered greatly. Rosa Maria Rosado was a mother who was just waiting for a bus. She was kidnapped, robbed, sexually assaulted, and killed. Sarah Gonzalez and Priscilla Almars were children who were walking to a party. They were abducted, sexually assaulted, and killed. Their families were left without their loved ones. After Assel went to the police and led them to the body, the police began to investigate further. They interviewed Ramon and other people involved. But the full investigation, the arrests, and the legal process were yet to come. At this point, the crimes had been committed, the body had been buried, and Assel had told the police what had happened. After Assel Abdigaparova went to the police on April 5, 2001, and led them to Rosa Rosado's body, the formal investigation began in full. The police recovered Rosa's remains from the shallow grave near the University of Texas at San Antonio campus. They also went to the motel where the crimes had taken place. They collected evidence from the motel room and from the car that Assel had sold after the murder. Assel gave police a written statement describing everything that had happened. She told them that Ramon and Santos were the ones who had committed the violence against Rosa. The police arrested Ramon Torres Hernandez. At first, he denied being involved in the crime. He asked for a lawyer, so the detectives stopped questioning him. But the very next day, Ramon changed his mind. He asked to speak to the detectives again. He then gave a confession. He admitted that he had been driving the car. He admitted that he had helped abduct Rosa and had taken her to his house and then to the motel. He admitted that he had been present when she was killed. However, he claimed that Santos Minjares was the one who had actually raped and killed Rosa. He tried to blame Santos for the worst parts of the crime. The police also investigated the 1994 murders of Sarah Gonzalez and Priscilla Almars. They had DNA evidence from that case that had not been matched in 1994. In 2001, they ran new tests and found that Ramon's DNA matched the sperm found on Sarah Gonzalez. This was a major piece of evidence. It connected Ramon to two more murders that had been unsolved for years. The police then formally charged Ramon with those murders as well. Ramon was held in the Bexar County Jail while awaiting trial. In August 2002, just a few months before his trial was scheduled to begin, he tried to escape from the jail. He placed a makeshift dummy in his bunk to make it look like he was sleeping. He then left his cell and went missing. Sheriff's deputies searched the facility and found him hiding in another cell. In that cell, they discovered a hole carved through the cinder block and bricks. The hole led to the parking lot of the facility. Ramon had also tried to carve around the commode and the ventilation systems in his own cell. A piece of steel plate from the intercom system was missing. That piece could have been used as a weapon. When questioned about the escape attempt, Ramon made a statement to the deputies. He said, "I fooled you too, right?" This escape attempt was noted by the authorities and later used to show that Ramon was a danger and would try to avoid punishment. The trial for the capital murder of Rosa Rosado began in October 2002 in Bexar County. The case was heard in the 175th District Court. The prosecution presented the indictment, which contained four main parts. The first part was that Ramon had killed Rosa Rosado during the course of committing or attempting to commit aggravated sexual assault. The second part was that he had killed her during kidnapping. The third part was that he had killed her during robbery. The fourth part was that he had murdered more than one person during different criminal transactions, but as part of the same scheme and course of conduct. This fourth part referred to the 1994 murders of Sarah Gonzalez and Priscilla Almars. The prosecution presented evidence from Assel Abdigaparova. She testified about the abduction, the motel, the shovel, the burial, and Rosa's death. They also presented Ramon's own confession. Even though he said Santos was the killer, his confession still showed that he had participated in the kidnapping, the robbery, and had stood guard while the sexual assault occurred. The prosecution also presented the DNA evidence linking Ramon to the 1994 murders. The jury listened to all the evidence and found Ramon guilty of capital murder. After the guilty verdict, the trial moved to the penalty phase. In this phase, the jury had to decide whether Ramon should receive the death penalty or life in prison. The prosecution presented more evidence about Ramon's past. They told the jury about his juvenile charge in 1986 for burglary. They told them about his 1990 conviction for carrying a knife. They also presented the details of his 1991 burglary convictions, especially the third one, where he had sexually assaulted Ana Marie Diaz while her baby slept beside her. They also mentioned the 1994 high-speed chase and the burglary charges that were dismissed. They presented the DNA evidence from the 1994 murders again, showing that Ramon had raped and killed 2 young girls. They also mentioned his escape attempt from the jail in August 2002. Ramon's defense team presented mitigating evidence. They called his family members to testify. They told the jury that Ramon's father had died when Ramon was a teenager. They pleaded for the jury to spare his life. However, the prosecution argued that Ramon was a serial rapist and murderer who would continue to be a danger if allowed to live. The jury agreed with the prosecution. They sentenced Ramon Torres Hernandez to death. After the trial, Ramon began his appeals. The law requires that all death sentences be automatically reviewed. His first appeal went to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. In March 2005, that court affirmed his conviction and sentence. That meant they found no major errors in the trial. Ramon then filed a state habeas corpus petition. This is a legal action where a prisoner asks the court to review whether his imprisonment is lawful. The trial court held an evidentiary hearing, where witnesses were called and evidence was presented. In September 2008, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals adopted most of the trial court's findings and denied the habeas relief. They rejected Ramon's claims, including his claim that his confession was involuntary due to withdrawal from his medication. Ramon then filed a federal habeas corpus petition in the United States District Court for the Western District of Texas. In May 2011, the federal district court denied his petition. It also denied a certificate of appealability, which is a document needed to take an appeal to a higher court. Ramon then asked the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals for a certificate of appealability. In March 2012, the Fifth Circuit denied his request. They found that none of his arguments were strong enough to warrant further review. Ramon then asked the United States Supreme Court to review his case. The Supreme Court has the power to decide whether to hear an appeal, but it does not hear most cases. On October 1, 2012, the Supreme Court denied Ramon's petition for certiorari. This meant that all of his appeals were exhausted. There were no more legal avenues available to stop his execution. On November 14, 2012, Ramon Torres Hernandez was executed in the state prison in Huntsville, Texas. The execution method was lethal injection. The procedure began at 6:12 p.m. when the warden asked Ramon if he had any final words. Ramon spoke to his brother, Daniel, who was watching from the viewing room. He also glanced at the relatives of Rosa Rosado, Sarah Gonzalez, and Priscilla Almars, who were also present. He said he was sorry for the pain he had caused. He also encouraged other death row inmates to keep fighting and not give up. Then the lethal injection drugs began to flow. Ramon took several breaths, then began snoring quietly. Within a minute, all movement stopped. He was pronounced dead at 6:38 p.m. Central Daylight Time. He was 41 years old. Santos Minjarez, the other man involved in Rosa's murder, was also convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. However, he died on death row in January 2012. His death was from natural causes. He had septic shock and multiple organ failure. He never received an execution date. Asel Abdigaparova, Ramon's girlfriend, was also convicted of capital murder in 2005. She was sentenced to life in prison. However, in 2007, a federal court overturned her conviction. The court ruled that she had not received a fair trial. As of 2012, she was still in custody awaiting a new trial. She had given birth to Ramon's son while in jail after the arrest. That child later went to live with Asil's older stepdaughter in Kazakhstan. After the execution, the families of the victims spoke to the media. Brenda Ayala, the sister of Priscilla Almars, said that they did not find happiness in the execution. She said they were not cruel people and did not want to watch someone die. She said she felt sorrow for Ramon's family because they would have to feel the same loss that the victims' families had felt. Rosa Rosado's family also witnessed the execution, but chose not to speak publicly afterward. The execution of Ramon Torres Hernandez on November 14, 2012, brought a formal end to the legal proceedings that had begun with the abduction of Rosa Maria Rosado over 11 years earlier. Story 4. Preston Craig Hughes III was born on December 24, 1965, in Buffalo, New York. Buffalo is a city in the northern part of the United States, near Canada. Preston was the son of a mother named Brenda Johnson. He also had a sister named Celeste Pareo. His family was not rich, but they lived together and took care of each other. Preston grew up in Buffalo during the 1960s and 1970s, and that city was where he spent most of his childhood and teenage years. As a young boy, Preston went to school like other children. He attended public schools in Buffalo and continued his education until he finished high school. He completed 12 full years of schooling and received his high school diploma. This meant he had a basic education that allowed him to read, write, and do simple math. After finishing high school, Preston needed to find work to support himself. He got a job as a warehouse worker. In a warehouse, his job was to move boxes, stack items on shelves, and help with shipping and receiving goods. It was a physical job that required strength and hard work, but it was a normal job for a young man without a college degree. When Preston was about 18 years old, something happened in Buffalo that would stay on his record. In 1983, a 16-year-old girl in Buffalo made a complaint against him. She said that Preston had raped her at knife point. The police arrested Preston and charged him with first-degree rape. However, the case did not go to trial because the victim did not show up in court. Without her testimony, the charge was dropped, and Preston was not convicted of that crime. He was free to go, and he left Buffalo not long after that. In 1983, the same year the charge was dropped, Preston moved away from Buffalo to a new city far away. He moved to Houston, Texas. Houston was a big city in the southern part of the country. It was warm and very different from Buffalo. Preston moved there to start a new life. He found work in Houston and continued to work as a warehouse worker. He lived in an apartment complex called the Lakehurst Apartments. His apartment was number 138A on Crescent Park Drive. The apartment complex was near a restaurant called Fuddruckers. Behind that restaurant, there was a vacant field with a dirt path that led from the restaurant to the apartment complex. Preston lived there and tried to build a normal life for himself. In Houston, Preston made new friends and had a social life. He enjoyed doing normal things like cooking, cleaning, shopping, and having fun with people he knew. He also had a dog that he liked to walk. His friends described him as easygoing and caring. He had a good sense of humor and liked to spend time with others. He also had romantic relationships. He had a girlfriend at one point, and he also lived with a woman for some time. But Preston also had some problems with women. He seemed to have anger toward women with light skin, which he called yellow girls. This would become important later because some of the people he had conflicts with had this skin tone. In May 1985, when Preston was 19 years old, he did something that led to serious legal trouble. There was a 13-year-old girl named Tracy Heger. Preston knew her through his cousin. One afternoon, Tracy was at her mother's apartment. She answered the door and spoke to Preston. She said goodbye and started to close the door, but Preston stuck his foot in the door and pushed his way inside. Once inside, he raped her. He also forced her to swear on a Bible that she would be his girlfriend. After the rape, Tracy told the police about what happened. Preston was arrested and charged with aggravated sexual assault of a child. While Preston was out of jail waiting for his trial on that charge, he did something worse. About a year later, in late 1985, Tracy was walking to school. Preston pulled up in front of her in a car. He told her that she should not testify against him in court. When she tried to run away, he pulled out a gun and fired it at her. He shot at her, but did not hit her. She was able to escape and told the police about this new incident. Because of this, Preston was charged with aggravated assault as well. In court, Preston did not admit he did these things. He denied that he raped Tracy or shot at her. However, the court found enough evidence against him. He was given 2 10-year probated sentences. This meant he did not have to go to prison immediately, but he had to follow strict rules. He had to meet regularly with a probation officer named Mikhail Klump. He was not allowed to break any laws. If he broke the rules, he could be sent to prison for 10 years on each charge. The court also gave him deferred adjudication, which meant the conviction was not final unless he violated his probation. So in September 1988, Preston Hughes was 22 years old. He was still on probation for sexually assaulting a 13-year-old girl and for shooting at her. He was supposed to meet with his probation officer regularly, but he often missed his appointments. His probation officer tried to stay late to accommodate Preston's schedule, but Preston still missed many meetings. During this time in Houston, Preston became friends with a 15-year-old girl named Chandra Charles. Chandra lived nearby with her family. Her mother did not have electricity in their home for some time, so Chandra often went to Preston's apartment to do things like curl her hair, iron her clothes, and listen to his stereo. She wore non-prescription eyeglasses as a fashion accessory. She had clear lenses in her glasses. Preston treated her like a younger sister. He did not have a romantic or sexual relationship with her, according to the women who knew both of them. Chandra would visit Preston's apartment regularly, and they seemed to be good friends. Preston's girlfriend at the time and another woman who lived with him both said that Preston and Chandra were just friends. Preston also knew other people in the apartment complex. One of Chandra's friends was a girl named Evelyn Brown. Evelyn knew that Chandra visited Preston, and she told Chandra several times to stay away from him. Evelyn thought it was not safe for Chandra to be around Preston, but Chandra did not listen. She kept going to his apartment. In the weeks before September 1988, Preston had another conflict. He was accused of sexually assaulting a woman named Linda. He denied it and was never arrested for that incident. But Linda's brothers and husband believed that he had assaulted her. They were angry with Preston and began making threats against his life. They said they would kill him. Because of these threats, Preston started carrying a knife with him for protection. He carried a fixed-blade hunting knife with a blade about 5 or 6 inches long. He wore it in a sheath on his belt. He felt scared that Linda's family members would attack him at any time. On the day before the crime, Preston went to work as usual. He worked his shift and got off around 6:30 in the evening. After work, he waited for a friend. They went to a liquor store on a corner near downtown Houston. They drank alcohol in the parking lot for a while. Later, 2 friends dropped him off at a bus stop. He took a bus but fell asleep on the bus. When he woke up, he was at the end of the bus route, far from his home. He had to call a taxi to take him back to his apartment. He arrived home late that evening. He checked the score of a football game because he had a bet on the game. Then he went to bed. He did not know that later that night, He would be involved in a terrible event that would change his life forever. The night of September 26, 1988, started like any other night. Preston was at his apartment. He went to bed after checking the football score. He did not know that Chandra Charles and her 3-year-old cousin, Marcel Taylor, were also nearby. Chandra's mother had asked her to go to a store. Chandra decided to walk across the empty field behind the restaurant to get to the store, and she took her little cousin Marcel with her. The path through the field was the same dirt path that Preston often used to walk his dog. That night, the path would bring them all together in a way that no one could have predicted. Preston Hughes went to bed in his apartment on the night of September 26, 1988, after checking the football score. But he did not stay in bed for long. Around 10:30 that evening, he got up to walk his dog. He took the same dirt path that ran through the empty field behind the Fuddruckers restaurant. The path connected the restaurant to his apartment complex. He carried his hunting knife on his belt because he was still afraid that Linda's brothers or husband would attack him. As he walked on the path, he saw Chandra Charles coming toward him. She was with her 3-year-old cousin Marcel Taylor. Chandra was on her way to the store, and she had to cross the field to get there. When they met in the middle of the path, Chandra told Preston that she was going to his apartment to borrow his contact lenses. Preston told her that she could not wear his contacts because they were not for her. Then Chandra did something that changed everything. She leaned in and kissed him. Then she started rubbing his crotch with her hand. She unbuttoned his jeans, and she also unzipped her own shorts. They exposed their private parts to each other. They rubbed against each other, but they did not have sexual intercourse. At some point, Preston's penis caught on her zipper, and it hurt him. He stopped the activity immediately. He told her to stop, and she did not like that. She asked him for $50. He refused to give her any money. This made her angry. She threatened to accuse him of rape. She said she would tell people that he had forced himself on her. Then she hit him. Preston hit her back. She tried to hit him again. At that moment, Preston pulled out his hunting knife. He began stabbing her. He stabbed her in the neck and in the chest. He cut her aorta and her jugular vein, which are major blood vessels. He stabbed her multiple times, somewhere between 6 and 10 times. He was scared and kept stabbing even after he realized it was Chandra. The little boy Marcel looked up at Preston and started crying. When the boy ran between Preston and Chandra, Preston stabbed him too. He stabbed the 3-year-old in the neck and chest, cutting his aorta and jugular vein as well. The little boy died quickly from his wounds. After stabbing both victims, Preston ran back to his apartment. He was wearing clothes that had blood on them. He took off his clothes and left them lying on the floor. He took the knife off his belt and hid it inside a box in his closet. He went outside briefly to let his dog in, and he ran around the parking lot with the dog for a short time. While he was outside, he saw a police helicopter flying overhead. The helicopter's spotlight shined on him for a moment. Preston got scared and went back inside his apartment. He went to bed again and tried to sleep. The 2 victims were left lying on the dirt path behind the restaurant. Chandra Charles was still alive, but she was badly hurt. Marcel Taylor was already dead. His body was covered in blood from the stab wounds on his chest and neck. Later that night, a Fuddruckers employee found Chandra lying in the field. The employee ran to flag down some police officers who were driving nearby. Officers Cook and Becker were in the area, and they responded to the employee's alert. The officers walked down the dirt path and found Chandra lying face down. She was bleeding from her neck and was breathing deep but was unconscious. They then spotted Marcel Taylor. He was dead, with large stab wounds on his chest and neck. About 10 minutes later, Sergeant Hamilton arrived at the scene. He asked Chandra if she wanted to roll over onto her back. She said yes, and he helped her turn over. He saw that she was also bleeding from her upper chest. Her shorts were unbuttoned and unzipped, and they were partly pulled down. Her underwear was also partly pulled down. Sergeant Hamilton asked Chandra what happened to her. She replied, "He tried to rape me." Sergeant Hamilton asked who tried to rape her. She answered, "Preston." She said she knew him. Sergeant Hamilton asked for Preston's last name, but he could not understand her answer. He asked if she knew where Preston lived. He thought she said something that sounded like Lakeside. Chandra's speech was becoming very slurred and hard to understand. Sergeant Hamilton asked if she was alone. Chandra then became upset and started asking, "Where is Marshall?" or Marchell, which was her cousin's name. She was taken to the hospital, but she was pronounced dead on arrival. Her injuries were too severe for her to survive. The police needed to find out who this Preston was. They knew that the field was near the Lakehurst apartment complex, only about 100 yards away. They went to the apartment complex and asked the manager for a list of all the tenants who lived there. The manager gave them the list. The police looked through the names and found only one tenant named Preston. That was Preston Hughes. His apartment was number 138A. Around 2:30 in the morning on September 27, 1988, the police officers went to Preston's apartment. He opened the door and let them inside. He answered some questions, but he did not mention the murders. He agreed to go with the officers to the police station for more questioning. He went with them voluntarily. At the station, the interrogation continued. The police ran a computer check on Preston. They found out that he had been involved in sexual assault cases before. They also knew that the dying victim had named Preston as her attacker, that he lived close to the crime scene, and that he knew Chandra Charles. Based on this information, the police arrested Preston at 4:30 in the morning. After his arrest, the police read him his legal rights. Preston said he understood his rights and agreed to talk. He continued to deny that he had done anything wrong. He insisted that he had not seen Chandra in about 2 months. The police kept questioning him. They told him that the girl had given his name before she died. They told him they believed he was the one who stabbed them. Preston became visibly upset. He started trembling and said, "I just don't want to go to jail." Then Preston broke down and began to talk. He admitted that he had stabbed someone, but he gave a version that was different from the full truth. He said that as he was walking home through the field, someone came up behind him and touched him on the shoulder. He said he thought it was one of the brothers who had threatened to kill him. He said he turned around and just started stabbing with his knife because he was scared. He said it was dark and he could not tell who it was at first. After he had stabbed 2 times, he saw that it was Chandra Charles. He said, "I was messed up and I just got scared and kept sticking." This was his first written statement. He signed it and the police typed it up. However, this first statement only mentioned one victim, Chandra Charles. It did not mention the little boy Marcel Taylor at all. The police realized that they needed a statement that covered both victims. The police decided to question Preston again. This time, they asked him about the little boy. Preston gave a second written statement. In this second statement, he changed his story. He said that Chandra did not come up behind him and tap him on the shoulder. He said that he saw her walking with a little boy on the path. He described the sexual activity with Chandra, how she demanded money, threatened to accuse him of rape, and how she hit him. He said that he pulled out his knife and started stabbing her. Then he said the little boy looked at him and started crying, and when the boy ran between them, Preston stabbed the boy several times. This second statement matched the physical evidence more closely because it explained both victims. While Preston was at the police station, he asked to use the phone. He called his boss at work to try to save his job. He was worried that if he missed too many days, he would be fired. He also called his probation officer, Mikhail Klump, around 7:30 that morning. He told his probation officer that he was at the police station and that he was being questioned about the stabbing deaths of a girl and a little boy. He said he had given the police a statement. He told the same story that he had given in his first confession, that he felt a tap on his shoulder and began stabbing blindly out of fear. His probation officer was surprised by how calm Preston sounded on the phone. Preston did not mention to his probation officer that the police had hit him or threatened him. Preston also made phone calls to a woman named Elizabeth Stroman, who answered phones at his workplace. He called her several times that day from the jail. In the first call, he told her that he gave a statement to the police saying he stabbed someone after he felt a tap on the shoulder. In a later call that morning, he told her he was being told to change his statement. In the afternoon, he called back and said he had changed his statement. He sounded upset on the phone, but he did not tell her that the police were beating or threatening him. During this time, the police searched Preston's apartment. They recovered a hunting knife from a box in the closet. They also found a pair of blue jeans and 3 shirts that had blood on them. They found a pair of eyeglasses stuffed between the cushions of a couch. These glasses had clear lenses and were non-prescription. They were the same type of glasses that Chandra Charles had been wearing earlier that night. The police also took a bed sheet from Preston's bed because they found evidence that he had masturbated on it before he went to sleep. They did not log the sheet as evidence right away, but they kept it. The police had Preston's confession, the victim's dying words, the knife, the blood-stained clothes, and Chandra's glasses in his apartment. They believed they had enough evidence to prove that Preston Hughes was the person who stabbed Chandra Charles and Marcel Taylor. Preston was in custody, and the case appeared to be solved. After Preston Hughes was arrested and gave his confessions, the case moved forward to trial. The trial began in Harris County, Texas, in the 174th Judicial District Court, with Judge George Goodwin presiding. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Chuck Knoll. Preston had 2 defense attorneys, Ellis McCullough and another lawyer named Thomas. The trial started in April 1989, about 7 months after the murders. The first phase of the trial was the guilt-innocence phase. During this phase, the prosecution presented its evidence to the jury. They showed that Chandra Charles had named Preston as her attacker before she died. They presented the 2 written confessions that Preston had given to the police. They showed the hunting knife that was found in Preston's closet, and they presented the blood-stained clothing that was recovered from his apartment. They also showed the jury the eyeglasses that were found stuffed between the cushions of his couch. The prosecution argued that all of this evidence proved beyond a reasonable doubt that Preston Hughes was the person who had stabbed Chandra Charles and Marcel Taylor. The defense team argued that Preston was innocent. They claimed that the police had framed him. They said that the police had beaten Preston and threatened him, and that he only signed the confessions because he was afraid for his life. They argued that the search of his apartment was illegal because the police did not have a warrant and Preston did not give proper consent. They claimed that the police had forged Preston's signature on the consent forms and on the confessions. They also argued that the eyeglasses were planted in his apartment by the police, and they said that the picture taken at the crime scene showed the glasses on the ground, not in his apartment. They pointed out that the knife tested negative for human blood and only positive for animal blood, so it could not have been the murder weapon. Preston himself took the stand in his own defense during the trial. He denied that he killed the victims. He told the jury that he only confessed because the officers hit him and threatened him. He said he was scared and signed the statements just to stay alive. He also said that the police took his signature from other documents and copied it onto the confessions and consent forms. He maintained that he was completely innocent and that the evidence was fabricated. The jury listened to both sides. They heard the victim's dying words, they heard Preston's confessions, and they heard his claims of being framed. After considering all the evidence, the jury did not believe Preston's story. They found him guilty of capital murder on May 3, 1989. Capital murder in Texas meant that he had killed more than one person during the same criminal act, which was the murder of both Chandra Charles and Marcel Taylor. The second phase of the trial was the punishment phase. The jury had to decide whether Preston should receive the death penalty or life in prison. During this phase, the prosecution presented more evidence about Preston's past behavior. They called Tracy Heger to testify. She was the 13-year-old girl that Preston had raped in 1985. She told the jury how Preston forced his way into her apartment and raped her. She also told them how he threatened her with a gun and shot at her when she was on her way to school to prevent her from testifying. The prosecution showed the jury that Preston was on probation for both of those crimes at the time he murdered Chandra and Marcel. They also mentioned that Preston had been charged with rape in New York, but that case was dropped when the victim did not appear in court. The defense called witnesses to speak in Preston's favor. 6 of his friends came to court and said that he was a good-natured person who was not violent. His mother also testified that she believed he was not a threat to society. Preston also testified again and denied that he had ever raped or threatened Tracy Heger. He told the jury that he was sorry for the deaths of the victims, but he continued to insist that he did not commit the murders. He promised the jury that he would not be violent in the future if they spared his life. The jury had to answer 2 special questions under Texas law. The first question was whether Preston's actions were deliberate. The second question was whether there was a probability that he would commit criminal acts of violence in the future and be a continuing threat to society. The jury answered both questions with a yes. This meant that the jury decided Preston was a future danger and deserved the death penalty. On May 4, 1989, the judge officially sentenced Preston Hughes to death by lethal injection. He was sent to death row on May 17, 1989, at the age of 23. After the trial, Preston began the appeals process. His lawyers filed a direct appeal to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, which is the highest court in Texas for criminal cases. In 1992, the court initially reversed his conviction because of an issue with a potential juror named Faulkner. The juror had said that he would vote for the death penalty if there was any percentage chance of future violence, which meant he misunderstood the law. However, the prosecution argued that the trial court had given Preston an extra peremptory strike, which cured the error. The court agreed and reversed its decision on rehearing. In June 1993, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals affirmed Preston's conviction and death sentence. The United States Supreme Court declined to hear his case in June 1994. Preston then filed a state habeas corpus petition, which is a request to review the legality of his imprisonment. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals denied this petition in September 2000. He filed a second state habeas petition, but the court dismissed it as an abuse of the writ in November 2001 because he was raising claims that could have been raised earlier. In November 2001, Preston filed a federal habeas corpus petition in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas. The district court denied his petition in May 2004. He appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. In June 2008, the Fifth Circuit rejected his appeal and upheld the district court's decision. The U.S. Supreme Court again declined to hear his case in May 2009. Over the years, Preston filed several more appeals and requests for DNA testing, but all of them were denied. His lawyers argued that the police had mishandled evidence and that new DNA testing could prove his innocence, but the courts did not agree. On July 18, 2012, the 174th District Court in Harris County scheduled Preston's execution for November 15, 2012. As the execution date approached, his lawyers filed multiple last-minute appeals to try to stop it. They argued that the state should allow new DNA testing on the evidence. They argued that the eyewitness testimony from the dying girl was unreliable because medical experts said she would have lost consciousness within 60 seconds of being stabbed. They also argued that the police had entered the evidence into the property room before Preston agreed to the search of his apartment. They challenged the state's use of a single drug in the lethal injection process. They asked the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles to commute his sentence to life in prison, but the board declined. All of these appeals were denied by the courts, including the U.S. Supreme Court. The execution was delayed for about an hour while the courts reviewed the final appeals, but none of them were successful. On the evening of November 15, 2012, Preston Hughes was led into the execution chamber at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice in Huntsville, Texas. His mother, Brenda Johnson, and his sister, Celeste Pareo, were present to witness his death. Preston was given the opportunity to make a final statement. He turned toward his family and said, "You know I'm innocent and I love you both. Please continue to fight for my innocence even though I'm gone. Give everybody my love. Bye." "Okay, Warden." His mother began to cry loudly and shouted, "Oh, Preston, I love you so much," and continued to proclaim her son's innocence. The lethal injection was then started. The drug flowed into his arms, and he took several short breaths before his body went still. A doctor pronounced him dead at 7:52 p.m. Central Daylight Time on November 15, 2012. He was 46 years old. After his death, Preston's supporters continued to maintain that he was innocent and that police misconduct had led to his wrongful conviction. However, the legal system had reviewed his case many times over 23 years and had consistently upheld the guilty verdict and death sentence. The victims, Chandra Charles and Marcel Taylor, had been dead for 24 years, and no one from their family attended the execution. The case was finally closed, and Preston Craig Hughes III was laid to rest, but the legacy of the murders and the trial remained in the memories of everyone who had been touched by that terrible night on the dirt path behind the restaurant in Houston.